All right, let's dive into the hidden architecture that structures our daily lives. I'm talking about the invisible rules and the deep-seated beliefs that shape pretty much everything we do, a lot of the time without us even realizing it. So, let's get into it.
So I want to start with a question for you. A simple one. Why don't you wear a cape to work? I mean, seriously. Or to the grocery store. There's no law against it, right? It might even be kind of practical on a windy day. So, why would it feel so weird?
Well, the answer is that our lives are basically governed by this powerful set of unspoken rules. And when someone breaks them, even in a totally harmless way, like, this guy from Seinfeld, it really gets our attention. It just feels off because they're messing with the social blueprint.
So what are these invisible rules? Well, sociologists have a name for them. They call them the first layer of our social blueprint, norms.
Okay, so a norm is basically a rule that tells us what's appropriate and what's not in any given situation. You can think of them like the traffic laws of social interaction. They guide our behavior so smoothly that, honestly, most of the time, we don't even know we're following them.
But, not all rules are created equal. The consequences for talking with your mouth full are a little different from the consequences of robbing a bank, right? So sociologists break norms down into 3 basic types, all based on how important they are to society.
First up, we've got something called folkways. These are the everyday customs, the courtesies of life. They're the little rules that make our social interactions predictable. Stuff like holding the door for someone, or please not talking loudly on your phone in a quiet coffee shop.
In this picture, it's a perfect illustration. I mean, is this guy immoral for sleeping under his desk? No, of course not. But he is making things super awkward. Folkways are like the social grease that keeps daily life running smoothly. When you break one, it doesn't cause some big moral crisis, but it definitely disrupts the flow and makes things uncomfortable or just plain weird.
Okay, so next up are morals. And you can hear the word moral in there, right? These are tied directly to our sense of morality. We're not just talking about being polite anymore. We're talking about being a good person. These norms deal with fundamental ideas of right and wrong. And yeah, violating them is a much, much bigger deal.
So unlike folkways, which just make things awkward, breaking a more can totally shatter trust. Think about stuff like dishonesty, cheating, or bullying. Even if they aren't technically illegal, they violate this core sense of decency we all have. And that leads to real consequences, like being socially shut out or ruining relationships. These mores are what protect the fundamental fabric of our social trust.
And finally, we get to the top tier, laws. These are the norms that a society decides are so absolutely vital to its survival and stability that they're formally written down and enforced by officials.
So when society decides a more, say, protecting human life is absolutely non-negotiable, it gets upgraded into a law. This makes the rule official, gets rid of any gray areas, and gives the government the authority to enforce it with serious consequences. It's really the ultimate statement of what a society believes in most deeply.
Okay, so having rules is one thing, but how does society actually get people to follow them? Well, that brings us to the enforcement mechanism, the classic system of carrots and sticks that keeps us all in line. And that mechanism is called sanctions. Sanctions are just the rewards and punishments that are used to encourage all of us to conform to the norms. They can be positive, rewarding you for following the rules, or they can be negative, punishing you for breaking them. And of course, these sanctions aren't all the same. They come in 2 main flavors. You've got your formal sanctions, which are handed down by an official authority, and then you've got informal ones, which come from, well, just the people around us.
This table breaks it down really well. Formal sanctions, they're applied by an authority. Think about getting a pay raise from your boss. That's a positive one. Or getting a speeding ticket, a negative one. Informal sanctions are enforced by your peers, the people around you. A simple thank you is a positive informal sanction, while getting a dirty look or being gossiped about, yeah, that's a negative one.
And this is where you can really see the 2 engines of social control working together. Formal sanctions, like the law, are powerful, for sure, but they can be slow and impersonal. Informal sanctions, though, like a simple look of disapproval, that's instant, it's personal, and it's constant. In fact, a lot of the time we're more motivated to avoid the shame from our friends than some distant fine, which just goes to show you how incredibly powerful those unofficial forces really are.
So, okay, we've got the rules, the norms,
And we've got the enforcement system, the sanctions. But that leaves one huge question hanging in the air. This gets us to the deepest layer of our social blueprint. Where do all these rules even come from?
And that's a super important question because they're not random. Not at all. There's a reason we have a folkway about personal space and a law against theft. There's an underlying logic to the whole thing.
And the answer is values. Values are those big, broad ideas a society shares about what is good, what is right, and what's desirable. They are the ultimate foundation for all of our norms. So if a society values privacy, it's going to have norms about not reading someone's mail. If it values human life, it's going to have really strong mores and laws against murder. It all connects.
And our values don't just pop up out of thin air. We get them from everywhere around us, our family, our friends, religion, our jobs, and ultimately these shared ideas become the very core of our identity.
So yeah, values are the bedrock. They influence the goals we chase after, they give us the why behind our norms, and they create the entire cultural framework that makes a society unique.
But there's a flip side to having these really deeply held values. It can lead to something called ethnocentrism. And that's basically the tendency to judge other cultures based on the standards of your own culture, often with this little feeling in the back of your mind that your way is the right way. I mean, because our own values feel so normal and natural, it can be really hard to accept that other people's values, which might be totally different, are just as valid for them.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. We've seen that norms are the rules, sanctions are the enforcement, and values are the deep foundation for it all. But if our own values create the very lens through which we see the world, how can we ever really hope to look at another culture's rules and understand them on their own terms? It's a tricky question and definitely one worth thinking about.